Hello, Boys and Girls Club. It's Roger. Today, I have a cool uh, little history fun fact lesson for you guys, and it is about the richest person in the world. Right now, for me, history is super cool. It's super fun. I know for everybody it might not be, but I think these little glimpses into the past are fun for everyone because not only do we learn, we get to reflect, we get to think about things. And it's also just interesting. Like, imagine living with those people and realize that we live in history right now. Everything that's happening is, one day going to be in a book somewhere, and it might be you, even, right? Which is super cool, super awesome to think about. So, who was the richest person in history, right? Was it a technology mogul? Was it like Bill Gates? Was he someone who invented something? Was it a king? Was it a some business person? Well, it was a king, right? And that is a little bit of a right, like, oh well, is it really his money? Well, at that time it was, right? And that king. Now let's think about where it could be, right? Was it in Europe? Was it in Asia? Was it in Africa? Right? Well, the richest person to ever live was actually the 10th king of Mali in 1317, right? 700 years ago was when the richest person alive lived. Now, the current richest person uh, in the world is Jeff Bezos, the guy who invented Amazon, right? And he is, at least as of 2019, his worth was $170 billion, right? So we're talking two of Jeff Bezos and then another couple billion dollars, right? Which is insane. You couldn't even fit all that money in a room. You really couldn't. You couldn't fit it in a house. You couldn't even fit it in a school. That's how much money that is. So, what did he do? Well, his name was Mansa Musa, and he was the 10th king of the Mali Empire. And Mali, where's that? Well, Mali is in West Africa. If we think about Africa, it is below the Sahara on the western side. So we're talking Mali, Morocco, Chad, above Nigeria, Ghana, all those places. That was part of his empire. And he was rich because of gold. So that part of the world in Africa has some of the most gold anywhere else in the entire world. The only place that are even remotely comparable is maybe California. But if we're talking like pure land with gold in it, it has to be Western Africa. So this guy, Mansa Musa, you know, he's just the king. He actually didn't even inherit that role. He wasn't just king because his dad was king or his mom was queen or whatever. He actually assumed the role of king because the current king or the previous king actually was lost at sea trying to sail to America, which is crazy when you think about it, that 700 years ago they were trying to sail from West Africa over to the Atlantic Ocean to establish trade routes to make even more money, right? That's crazy. So, what did Mansa Musa, the richest man ever, do with all his money? Well, he spent it all on a giant road trip to Mecca. Where's Mecca? Mecca is in Saudi Arabia, and he did this on the Hajj. The Hajj is the trip that every Muslim takes in their life to visit Mecca. It's a religious thing, and he was a very devout religious person, right? And so along the way, what he did was everywhere he stopped in Timbuktu, he stopped in Cairo, he stopped in Tunisia, he stopped in Constantinople, and he stopped in Mecca. Those are like the most notable places, but he went on a giant trip across Africa and the Middle East. And he spent so much money that he actually destroyed local economies for years, which is crazy to think about because for one person to do that, he would have to give away and spend more money that is actually even in the area to begin with. He was actually a pretty generous person. He gave away most of his money along the way. He kept building mosques, which are like churches in Islam. And he wasn't very vain. He wasn't just making a bunch of statues everywhere. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy to think about that the richest person of all time was actually a king from West Africa who spent almost all of his money on the poor and building churches, right? Which is even more interesting when you contrast that when we think about the world at the time. While Europe was dealing with a lot of diseases and a lot of civil war, West Africa was actually flourishing, some would even say better than most of Central and Northern Europe, which is crazy because that's not always what we're told. This guy, he had established trade routes all the way to Asia, to China. He had connections up in Spain and Rome and Italy. Absolutely insane. But this is why history is so important, is because we learn about how we are all so much more connected than we previously thought. You might have never thought that the richest person in the world was from West Africa, and that they actually are some of the reasons why the rest of the world even acquired so much wealth through the rest of even modern time. So that's why it's always great that we look back, we learn, and we figure out things that we might not know or didn't think were possible from before. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Hope you have a good day.